We're kicking off with a bit of a showstopper here. We have a panel moderated by Steel Media's fantastic Sophie Atkins. What inspires ex-AAA creators to start their own enterprise? So can I please have your heartiest welcome for Sophie and the panelists?
Hello. Thank you for everyone joining us today. I'd like to kick it off by giving everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves and give a little bit of background for those of you who don't know. Would you like to begin, Jim?
All right, sure. So I started in the industry in 2016, so I'm still kind of a noob, to be honest. I had my studio for multiple years, and now I'm working in AAA, so I did the opposite of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, I'm Sean Kauppinen. I've been in the industry since 1995, and worked on over 600 games in my career, and have worked with a lot of studios that have spun out from AAA. And what I've done for 13 years before the last 3 years is I was actually a consultant and kind of an agent, helping studios go through the whole process of raising their money when they leave, and then eventually getting acquired again. So.
And Charles, joining us digitally.
Hi, yes. My name is Charles Yu. I'm the founder and CEO of VoxPop Games. A lot of what we do right now is actually helping independent developers get their own enterprises off the ground. While I myself don't have quite as storied a background as these other panelists here, both my partner and my chairman are ex-Rockstar, and I can speak to their experiences as well as my own, getting them on board.
Brilliant. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm the event content producer for Steel Media. Otherwise, probably the youngest person in the company, but don't let that intimidate you. Right, so let's kick it off. So first of all, I would like to actually dive into the question at hand for the panel of what inspires ex-AAA creators to leave. So I'll start off with you, Jason. Why do you think people don't want to be in AAA studios? And then we'll flip it the other way.
All right, I think, I don't know, I think there might be 3 reasons why. I think there's either the push, the pull, or the stumble into it. So if we're talking about the pull, right, it's that itch that perhaps, you've had the best leads, you had every opportunity in AAA, but you've always had that itch to make your own game. And so, that pulls you to get that started. But it might also be the push too, right? I know some big studios that don't allow the people to express themselves and grow. And so, they'll essentially be pushed out and go make your own game. And then, yeah, there's the people that just fall into it, sort of like myself, right? I got an opportunity, I jumped into it and enjoyed it. So that would be, yeah, the ways.
I think that's a fantastic baseline of the reasons why. It normally also is triggered by some kind of a catalyst event. So either you finished a AAA game and the wonderful publisher then says, great, now we're laying the team off, despite sales being healthy or whatever, because they don't know what they want to do with the company. Or it could be an exit event where your studio gets bought by a large AAA studio and you're like, I'm not working for these people. I'm going to take this money. I'm going to actually go follow my dream, which is to work with these 3 to 5 people that I actually like, and we're going to make our own studio. And I think the last part is, I think a lot of people think, wow, there's a lot of waste in very large companies. What if I could just kind of focus in and make just some pure gameplay and follow that passion?
Do you have anything to add, Charles?
Yes. One thing that my business partners have brought up repeatedly is a feeling of lack of investment in the company. And this can be created by bad management. This can be created by circumstances of the studio. But at the end of the day, when you're working with hundreds or even thousands of people, it can be very difficult to make your vision seen, to make your voice heard. Whereas in a small company with only a few people, you might have to talk to literally everyone that is in the company every day. And whatever you own of that company on paper, you will have an impact on how that company functions on a day-to-day, right? You could own no equity in a startup, but if there are 5 people, you better believe you're going to have pretty substantive creative input on how that company functions.
Absolutely. And you brought up an interesting point, both Sean and Jason, that sometimes it's these creators, they want to have that freedom of expression. And I wonder, obviously, in Behaviour Interactive, you've joined them, you love them. So what is it that you guys do as a company which kind of retains that talent and lets people express that creativity?
That's a really good question. And actually, that's the main question I was asking myself before joining Behaviour, but they convinced me that that's what they allowed people to do and have in the studio. I think there's multiple ways, and I think the thing that sold me the most was actually the reason was the position that they were hiring me for. So my position full-time is to help artists. So I spend a lot of time trying to better understand them, develop tools to do their skill mapping, their interests, their preferences, and then based on that, we'll offer them a lot of opportunities to change different projects. So there's a lot of projects ongoing throughout the company, and they have that option to do internal mobility, which again allows them to feel more ownership when they don't feel like they can. So if they do want to work on a bigger project and be focused on something, then they can. And then if they feel, like that's not working out for me and I want to have an opportunity to be part of a smaller team, well, most likely we'll have a spot for them in another project, while retaining the fact that we're in a bigger studio, so we have all of that support to help them grow, and you have access to some of the best in the business, right? Which is pretty cool.
And Charles, some of the studios you work with, do you find that this is a recurring issue which they come across, that they just don't have that freedom of expression and that's why they want to be a standalone?
Yes, right. There's a big limit to what you can do to influence a project when you're part of a team that rigidly structured. And frankly, the games industry is one in which a lot of people are sort of encouraged to have their own projects anyway, right? People often will work on their own projects on their own time, and there can be some uncertainty over whether you own your own project, right? So if you're going to be working on your own games anyway, a lot of people figure, might as well take this to completion and see how far I can get with it.
Absolutely. And Sean, I do wonder as well, are there any people, for instance, who... Okay, going on to like M&A, basically. When you have a large AAA studio, they absorb an indie. Do you find that the creators of these indie studios then want to stay in the AAA, or do you find they want to leave? Or how can a studio kind of keep that employee retention?
So successful acquisitions tend to be where they leave the company culture alone that you actually acquire. You bought them as a larger company because they're doing something right, something that you like. And the best acquisitions and integrations come from, wow, these are the things that you guys are doing well. We'd love to bring some of that into our large organization. But then also, we also see some things that you might be able to improve. Like your planning sucks. You don't have any kind of project management going on, but with a little bit of resources and some training in that area, you might be able to produce even higher quality content. The biggest thing about all studios and for them to work is culture. So at Behaviour, a company where they have kind of a culture of innovation and exploration, I think you do get to have a couple days a year where you get to go and work on projects that aren't core to the mission of the company, that are R&D days. These types of things are really, really great for retaining employees because they get to do that expression. And then the last point about, if you're going to work on IP on your own time, carve that out in your agreement in the first place. Don't wait for it to come up like, hey, I built this thing, the famous Notch story, like, hey, wait a second, who owns that? Does King own Minecraft? No. It's because it was already carved out that he was working on a project on the side.
And do you think that more and more big studios are understanding this and slowly integrating it into the way they kind of run their company?
I would say they have to. If you think about the feedback in studios maybe 10 years ago, people wouldn't go and stand up and say, hey, we're really upset about this issue, and company cultures have gotten horrible, and hopefully they're improving now. But yeah, you have to listen to the people these days, and they're going to tell you what they want to do. So you might as well start working with, as a group and building a culture where it's about collaboration, innovation, exploration, and they're there for the right reasons. I mean, this is the game industry. It's supposed to be fun.
And Jason, before I go on to kind of pushing more into the independent side of things, are there any misconceptions you feel people have about working for a AAA?
I think it might be
Free food?
yeah, free food definitely. But no, I think often it might be the studio, being different. I know that some of the bigger studios. Again, I had that idea as well, misconception of not wanting to work for a bigger studio because I thought my creativity would be dead and I wouldn't have a chance to express myself. But so I think it's a business opportunity, and as you were saying, right, I think it's important that we allow creativity, we push, and just to add on, that transparency as well, I think is very helpful, because I think there's a misconception sometimes that's saying, I'm not being listened to, when in fact, there's just no communication happening. And I think that's something that's super important.
Do you want to add anything? Or
No, that was absolutely spot on. The transparency part is it's imperative.
Absolutely. And Charles, then kind of bringing it more onto when people kind of go on and create their own independent studios, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that people face?
Well, the most obvious one is go-to-market strategy, right? So a lot of independent studios, they don't really have a whole lot of money up front to spend on marketing, right? Actually, that's one of the issues that VoxPop was set up to address. I'm not going to do a whole business pitch for my own company in this panel, but really, when you don't have that money to get the flywheel going, it's very difficult to get eyeballs on your game, right? The importance of these sorts of influencer markets and these online markets, I think, is demonstrated by a game like Among Us. Everybody here probably already knows that story, but when it first came out 3 years ago, it was kind of a modest failure. But because of the pandemic and because of streamers picking it up basically at random, it's literally changed how English is spoken on the internet, for better or worse. So finding a good go-to-market strategy, finding a way to actually leverage these resources to get your game out there, I think is probably the biggest challenge that independents face. Big studios, they can sort of throw money at the problem. You'll never see an independent game taking out ads on the subway or on the side of a bus.
Sean, I wonder if you have any stories to share about companies you've worked with who have gone independent.
Yeah, there's a lot of studios. I worked with them. If everyone knows Ensemble Studios, they did Age of Empires, and a lot of the studios, when Microsoft walked in and said, okay, we're going to shut this thing down, they said, okay, and they spun out, and it became about 7 different studios in the Dallas area, and some in Austin. The beauty of that was everyone had like their severance packages. So they had a few months in the bank, and like, okay, we've been doing game development for 15 years. Let's build out some small groups and let's start some companies. And you got Robot Entertainment, you got Boss Fight, you got Bonfire, you got a New Toy, a bunch of studios, and Zynga ended up buying a bunch of these studios, which is hilarious because Microsoft should have never sold them in the first place or gotten rid of them. But it all comes down to they had a catalyst moment, and that was, wow, this is the chance. We can either go try and work for somebody else, or we could do our own thing. And I think with that much experience, and you had the right groups of people together, so somebody from production, somebody from art, somebody from design, that tends to be the holy trinity. Like if you have those three groups, you have somebody who can run the business, somebody who can actually design the product, and somebody who can give it that visual feel and make it approachable, then you have the right pieces to start.
I wonder, just following off on that, do you feel that potentially there's this kind of wave kind of coming in and out of going from, big studios to indie to big and just back and forth throughout the industry?
That happens all the time. If you look at the strategy of LucasArts over the years, it's like, hey, we have these Star Wars IPs and Indiana Jones. We're going to build up a studio of 400 people. Oh, wait, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to fire everybody and we're just going to license it to everyone else. But wait, why are we licensing it? Let's bring it into-house and hire 400 people. This would be awesome. They went back and forth and did this about 4 or 5 times over the last 20 years. And now, it's kind of stable within Disney, which is great. But it was kind of a shit show for a long time.
And sorry, just coming back to you, Charles, very quickly. Have any of the studios you've worked with kind of gone through that experience? You've helped establish them, set them up, and then M&A happens and they get absorbed into a larger, maybe a AAA studio as well.
Well, to be honest, we haven't been around that long yet, so no. I know that's probably not a particularly interesting answer in this panel.
No, that's fine. And Jason, I do have to ask as well, obviously originally you came from that kind of more entrepreneurial background. What was the experience like in comparison to working, for a large studio now?
It's a lot easier now. That's the main one. I get to sleep a little bit more, right? So that's always nice.
Jealous.
Sorry, man. I got my 9 hours every night. It's beautiful. But no, actually, it was very fun. And I think one of the things that we forget is, as you were saying, there's the holy trinity of the main skill sets that you need, but there's a lot of other skill sets that you need as well. And there seems to be sometimes dilemma between, I love working on my shit alone in my basement, not bothering anybody, and then, I can't do everything, so I need to hire someone, and then I need to lead them and inspire them, but I don't have that skill set. So, there's a lot of opposite skill sets, I'm not sure what the right word would be, but that are required to be able to start a studio, and it makes it a challenge. So I mean, if you like being in uncomfortable water, that's a perfect place to be. I truly enjoyed it. I had a blast. But I think at the end of the day, what I realized I loved most was trying to help people grow. That's what I want to do. So I didn't really care about the games. I know, sorry. But for me, it was about helping people more than anything. Make
you wanted
awesome
the
games.
creativity without the stress, basically.
I'm sorry? Yeah, exactly. All the creative without the stress. But no, I think, again, a lot of people want to start their own studio because they think they can do it better. Right? And that's completely valid and it's fair. But what I realized is I couldn't do it better. So I want to work with the best and help them do the best possible job.
There's a lot to be said for being able to go to bed at night and knowing that if everything goes horrible in the world, they still got to pay you like a month's severance, no matter what. There's something in that versus, oh my God, Top Ramen again. This is awesome. Can I buy eggs this week?
You guys are killing me.
Go for it, Charles, sorry.
Pardon?
Oh, sorry, what did you just say?
Oh, I just said you guys are killing me.
So,
Oh,
go for it.
sorry, there is a bit of a delay between what I'm seeing and I'm sure what everyone is saying. So sometimes I start speaking and it turns out everyone's speaking already.
Oh, that's all right. So, obviously, other than, the copious amounts of ramen you eat in an indie studio, is it also, it's difficult, it's a smaller team, but, you get this freedom of creativity. But do you find that, I'm going to type this one at you, Sean, do you think it's harder for them to get investments if they haven't got that AAA background? If they're coming purely from an indie, base, and they haven't got the ex-AAA, is it harder to get that support?
I'm always the one that says if you don't have background producing things, you're probably going to have a really hard time getting venture capital. In fact, it's probably impossible, especially because you're probably trying to pitch a game project versus a company that's going to fill a need that isn't currently there. And the skill sets tend to develop a lot easier when you're in a large company because you can see, oh, that's what that role does. That's what that role does. Here's the responsibilities. I get it. And you put 5 to 10 years in at a company, and then you're at Riot Games, and you're now a lead game designer. You want to spin out? There's a pretty good chance we can get you some money, right? You're gonna get paid. You worked on Call of Duty for 5 years. You have a team of people who actually have AAA experience. You're probably going to be able to get money. If you worked on some stuff that you launched on Steam that sold hundreds of copies, and you're still living in your own basement apartment, you're probably not going to get money.
And Charles, I wonder, you go for it. Yep. I was going to say, do you
if I may
a lot
add
of
a bit of... It's that delay again. I'm so sorry.
Go for it.
If I may add a little perspective on this, I will say to anybody who does want to get into entrepreneurship, one of the most important things you can do is find yourself a good partner, right? This is why I'm so thankful for my partner, Mark. He does cover some of my weaknesses and background, right? His background at ex-Rockstar is probably one of the reasons why we were able to secure seed funding, right? So if you know that there is a weakness in your background, then what you really want to do is you want to find people who can help fill in that weakness, because a team is not one person, right? I can actually say this as both an entrepreneur and as someone from a venture capital background, because I used to work at the investment team at Venture Capital. So when the founders have a vision, but they have some sort of weakness in their qualifications, that's when they need to look for team members or even just advisors who can fill in that gap.
So Charles, if you, for instance, haven't come from that ex-AAA background, how can you build those connections, find the right partner? How can you do that? Is it just kind of networking and trial and error?
I suppose in a way, error, but it's smart trial and error, right? You don't just go about your normal daily life and hope that like the exact right partner is going to fall straight into your lap, right? That's not going to be particularly fruitful. What you want to do is you want to look for events where people with kind of the skill set that you want might gather. I met Mark because I was doing game jams, right? He was doing his own recruiting for his own previous venture, GrummaWorks, right? LinkedIn is a great way to make connections, right? It's especially good since you can actually see people's backgrounds, right? You know, not all of your LinkedIn invite connection requests will get accepted, and not all of those acceptances will lead to further conversation, but it's a great resource to get started, right? So in a way, yeah, it is a lot of trial and error. You do have to keep putting yourself out there. You do have to just keep trying. And whether or not you find the right person is going to come down to chance, but perfect analogy, right? Winning the lottery is exceedingly rare, but you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a lottery ticket, right? And that's really what it comes down to. You have to put yourself into situations where it is possible.
And do you think with, you know, the past few years of lockdown that more and more indies sprung up basically over lockdown, do you think that pattern's going to continue, or do you think people are slowly going to return back to wanting to work for, you know, large AAA companies? Charles?
I think that the current wave of independence is driven actually less by lockdown and more by the proliferation of tools that make game design cheaper, faster, more possible for small teams, as well as high-profile success stories like Undertale or Among Us, right? Everyone knows that it's unlikely that their game is going to be that kind of freak viral hit, but the fact that we have those freak viral hits, the fact that they are so culturally relevant, I think is a big shift from 10 years ago, right? This is not to say that games like, you know, Splunky or Cave Story weren't big successes in the time, but they didn't really shape gaming culture the way that some of these indie games do today. In terms of trends, it's a little difficult to say. To be frank, I do imagine that some of the fervor will die because the market is a bit oversaturated in a way currently. And so many of the people who are getting in now, they will find trouble finding success. Many solo acts or small teams especially may find that independent development wasn't what they thought it would be, right? With less support and lower budgets, less certainty, right? But I think overall, as long as these tools are continuing to be made, and as long as the barrier for entry continues to go down, there will always be a healthy and thriving independent games.
Have you noticed any trends yourself, Sean?
I will tell a story. So, the last big wave of independent studios was between 2008 and 2010. And the reason for this is because the retail market died. Everyone was doing box products. The original THQ was out there doing lots of licensed games. There were a lot of AAA studios and a lot of AA studios. So I believe out of the top 30, about 20 of them died within that time frame. What happened was somebody got smart at Walmart and goes, wait, we sell all these games and they only really sell for the first 30 days. So then they had this real long tail shelf life. So what if we went and just ordered enough that we're going to sell in 30 days, see how it sells, and then we'll do more. So it caused this crisis within all the publishing companies. They go, oh, crap, we're not getting these orders, we're not getting the shelf time, because they just want us to give them a new AAA game every 30 days that will sell as well, because that's how they looked at the space. So what they started doing was they'd order half of what they thought it would sell, and then they'd do a reorder immediately for 2 weeks later and say, okay, in 2 weeks, ship us the other half of the thing. And if it didn't sell in the first 5 days, they'd cancel the second order. So as a publisher, you're either manufacturing twice as much as people want, or you're manufacturing half and then doing a rush order with Sony and Microsoft, and it becomes very expensive. There's warehousing costs, all these things. The entire industry fell apart. All these AAA studios spun out. It was a beautiful time. What we have right now, whether people want to admit it or not, there's a financial crisis. It is harder to get venture capital today than it was 3 months ago. It's going to continue to get hard for a while. There will be a great shakeout in a lot of studios, and you're going to see a lot of teams cutting 10, 20, 30% of their staff. Not saying it's everywhere. Places where they have good tax credits, Canada's an awesome country for that, helps support that kind of stuff. But there will be a lot of independent studios starting to roll out in the next 6 to 12 months. So if you have a business helping studios roll out, this is a great time for that kind of business.
So kind of on that note, how can AAA studios like build that trust? Can they keep their employees? What can they do?
They're looking at how do we, well, if we're a public company, how do we please our investors? Because most stocks are down 30% or more. How do we keep them happy? How do we keep their money in the company so we have the equity to maintain what we need to do? Luckily, games as a discretionary spending vehicle do not really get hit in recessions. They call them recession-proof. So that part will stick around. But it also gives studios a chance, or publishers a chance to go, well, if we got rid of X% of the staff, it would be a little more profitable. So there are some business reasons behind why things will happen. If you're a good AAA studio, now's the time to kind of shore up what you want to do as a company and make sure that you have that path to your next title and your next 2-3 titles, and that you really, really have your employees in the boat, because lifeboat drills are going to start.
Yeah, I mean, Jason, I'm going to take this to you then, because Behaviour Interactive, you guys are a world-known name, some really huge IPs going on. I wonder if you can speak specifically about what you guys do to kind of continue that relationship with your employees and kind of make them feel safe in uncertain times.
Sorry.
That's huge. What do we do? Wow, I think we do a lot, actually. I think we're hiring a lot of a specialist to really help guide us. So, we've worked with outside firms to try to analyze our best business practices and trying to make sure that we are going in the right direction. We do speak with our employees as much as possible. I think it's very important to break down those barriers. Again, transparency is very important. It's just as an example, actually, someone reached out to me yesterday as a 3D artist. He said, I'm an intern, I just started. And I thought, that was awesome, right? Like, do you come to the office, we can meet up? And he's like, actually, I live in Toronto. I'm like, perfect. So we're going to go grab a coffee after this, right? And I think it's very important to keep those relationships open. And even though I'll never get to work with that person specifically, he is still part of our team and working with people. So, for me to have that one-on-one time, I think is very important to better understand exactly how people are feeling, what they like, what they don't like, and seeing how we can future-proof the business in that sense. And I think that might be the key, is listening to the people and seeing how we can adapt.
Definitely. No, I mean, that's great to hear. And I'd also wonder, could you speak a little bit about how you guys worked through lockdown? Because obviously lots of people went remote. It's very difficult to manage the company culture when, people are working from home, but you guys have been growing and doing well. So how did you guys manage that?
Well, actually, I started Behaviour during the lockdown. So, and again, I'm a very human person. I love working with people. I love talking to people. That's why I'm here. I want to talk to people. And I was surprised at how fast I adapted to talking to people online, even with the awkward gaps and the lag like that. I think that, the fact that we're writing a lot of the things down, and it pushed us to think more visually. And so as an artist, I think that helped us as well. And everything is black and white. So it's very easy when someone says, I didn't know, right? Like you go like, nope, screenshot, there it is, right? We had a conversation about this. So I think there are definitely some pros and cons to working virtually. And then, the fact that, you don't have to run from meeting to meeting, and, you do have that break to go to the bathroom when you need to. I think there's a lot of optimization that I was able to bring when I started working virtually that, I wouldn't have necessarily done in the office, where, I know that I can contact anybody like this instead of like, oh, he's on 4th, maybe I won't go see him today.
Yeah, and kind of on that note, I've been in Seattle, obviously, for our previous conferences and spoken with loads of companies there. And one of the sentiments that came up was that a lot of people wanted to kind of develop their own studio to kind of, which maybe might be about counterintuitive, but they wanted to have a bit more freedom. They wanted to have their working hours, their own personal life. And I wonder, Sean, do you think that is slightly changing because of lockdown, that now these kind of larger studios are realizing, actually, we need to figure out this work-life balance, and so maybe that appeal is being drawn away from being an indie?
It's an interesting thing, because the lockdown did actually change culture and prove that people can get work done remotely. And there's two philosophies that I can see. One is what It's, okay, I trust my people, they're going to do great work. I don't care if they check in at 9 and leave at 5. It's all about the effort. What is the output we're getting, and are we getting velocity? Great. I don't care if you go take a 4-hour lunch and you want to work at 1 o'clock in the morning. Doesn't matter. It's when if the work is there when it's needed, and here's the art comes in at the right time and the music comes in at the right time, pieces come together, great. The other side is more of the old school culture, and you get this when you have more senior aged leaders who are like, well, I had to go to the office when I was your age, and that shit doesn't work. It's not going to work with this generation and future generations, because it's like, well, I should have the freedom to do these things. And it's also because I think people are now people. They're not just, as we call it, human capital.
And yeah, actually, to add on to this, I think that I've seen often the opposite effect of not trying to fight people to work, but to tell them to stop, right? Because now everything's accessible. They have it at home, and now I'm just going to keep working, and they burn themselves out. So that's been more of the challenge now is, try to slow them down. They're passionate about what they do. They love the projects. They love the products. They love their team. They don't want to let anybody down. And now they feel like they need to do more to just stay.
They want to prove that they're getting stuff done.
Exactly.
I didn't take my kids to school this afternoon and then go to the pool for 3 hours. Look, I did this. Proof of work. Love it.
If I may add one thing as well. If you're getting into entrepreneurship because you want to have a better work-life balance, you're making a big mistake. And let me tell you something. As an entrepreneur, your real job description is going to be every job that you haven't hired somebody else to do yet. Do you have permanent legal counsel? No? Well, I guess you're going to have to review and write every contract, aren't you? Do you have a hiring manager? No? You're going to review all of those personally. Do you have an accountant? Do you have a web developer? Do you have, a back-end programmer? Do you have an artist? Do you have marketing staff? Every time you say no, do you have a janitor, right? Every time you no, you are going to be doing that yourself. Chances are pretty good you weren't trained to do all of those things. So really, you're going to spend a lot of time learning how to do those things as well. It's going to be a very big adjustment. And frankly, if you aren't prepared for that, you aren't going to survive as an entrepreneur. What you really need as an entrepreneur is to say, I'm willing to put my life on hold for X amount of time, right? I'm willing to put in that extra effort for this amount of time because I believe that will pay off in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. That kind of.
Right, we are closing down on time, so I'll probably do one kind of quick fire round of questions. So, Charles, what do you think the biggest misconception people have when starting an indie studio?
Biggest misconception is I'm going to get to control all aspects of the game. I'm going to get to work on the game myself, right? You're going to have to handle a lot of business operations. You're going to have to be, like I said, learning how to do all these things that you might not have entirely considered, right? When starting the studio. This is going to sound crazy in retrospect, it is crazy. But, I didn't think I would have to know what tax laws were like in Europe when I started VoxPop. I wasn't like, I really need to research how the EU handles value-added tax, right? You know what else is going to sound crazy in retrospect? I kind of thought sales tax was in the United States was handled from the state where you operated. But no, we have to calculate sales tax on a per state basis based on where the sales are coming from, right? These kinds of considerations took me completely by surprise. And ultimately, when I look back on my assumption that I would have been able to just continue working on all of my old projects as normal while handling all of these operations, it seems very naive. When you start a company, when you are leading that company, you really do need to be prepared to dedicate your life to it.
I have a quick fire answer for this one. When you're starting a studio, normally it's a group because it gets together and like, awesome, and we'll all, 5 of us, we'll all own 20%. And they have different degrees of dedication. So the story that my mentor Bob Wallace told me years ago is there's a chicken and a pig walking down the road. And the pig, pig's like, oh, no, I'm happy. And the chicken goes, we should start a restaurant called Bacon and Eggs. And the pig goes, I don't know about that, because I'd be really dedicated and you'd only be interested. So you need to make sure that you have a bunch of pigs, not any chickens, in your group. I don't know if that actually makes a whole lot of sense, but everyone needs to be dedicated to the same degree, because otherwise you're going to get somebody who's like, well, I have a family, so I need to take this side job, and then I'm only dedicated 50% or 30%. So you need to have people who are all in to the same degree. Otherwise, do it as a side project until it's up and running enough, and then you can actually all dedicate.
So unless you're both struggling and just only living on ramen, it's not worth going into business with them.
Everyone must struggle to the same degree. It must be fair.
Yeah, and they can't get the second quality ramen. It has to be the bottom shelf. Yeah. Jason.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with both of you. I think, again, having started the studio, you're right. Like, everybody has to be in equally. It's going to be very difficult. That's why those first conversations about shares and exit strategies are so important to have right at the beginning, because even though you might think we're all pigs right now, there might be, something changing in the future. So that's definitely for sure. And then the other thing was, sorry, just to get back on what Charles was saying. Oh, man, I forgot now. I drew a blank. I love the pig stories so much. You have to do everything. Yes, thank you. That's the thing, right? So you do have to do everything, and you're not going to be the best at everything. And often, I think we want to start our own studio because, again, we love what we do. So, for example, as an artist, you want to be an artist. You're a programmer. You want to do programmer design. You want to be the best designer, design the best game. And then you forget that you're going to have to do every other job. And so, I remember myself when I was a little bit less creative when I was starting my business, then I'd bully myself like, oh, really? You don't want to be creative? Fine, do financials. Right now, I'd go and do financials, and I hate this. Right? And then I'd go like, yeah, wait, see, you got to finish it. Next time, you're going to be more creative. I'm like, okay, fine.
I would say one other thing, you need to have some pretty thick skin to be an independent out there, because inside of a larger AAA studio, if you create like a piece of art or you work on a design and people don't like it, a committee or a group will probably be like, well, if you add a little more green, or how about this? And it's still kind of positive. If you're independent and you're out there making your game, you're like, this game is shit. No one wants to buy this. This is literally the feedback you will get from biz dev people who are like, nope, we're not publishing it. This is crap. Why did you think anyone would want to buy this? Steampunk, no one buys steampunk. Did you do any research? Like, it's abusive. It's horrible.
We can't leave this on a negative note, though. I mean, like, seriously. I mean, we've been talking about all the negative here, but it is such an enriching experience. It's beautiful.
Yeah, great. Okay,
if you hear us saying don't do it, and you do it, you were probably not going to succeed as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. We've got about 3 minutes left, so are there any questions from the audience for our lovely panelists? Oh, yeah, Kai, go on.
I just want to ask, what was the most important piece of advice you got before you embarked on your ventures, and has it changed in years if someone was to ask you?
Wow. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I remember I tried to start different businesses that were outside of my interests in art and made a video game before. And, the way I've always compared it was I was always trying to, throw my dinghy in the river and trying to, ram upstream, and it wasn't working. And then when I finally found that, I'm super passionate about making video games, and I had the right partners, and everything was falling into place, it just felt like I was throwing my dinghy in the river and enjoying the ride, right? So it was very different. So if I had one advice, I guess, is make sure you love what you do, right? So it's going to give you that drive. So again, I started with, look at that perfect circle. I'm going to circle back to the very first answer, right? When you have that pull or that push, when you do have that pull, right, there's nothing that's going to stop you. You're always going to want to go towards that instead of always trying to fight against something.
I would say another thing is, because if you break off and you're building your own studio, of course you want to work with your friends, but everyone has those friends that are not very good, and they're going to screw stuff up, right? So that's a hard part of the conversation. Like, yeah, Dave, we really like you, but you kind of aren't a good fit for our company. And you have to use a business perspective. So is this person going to use up all your money in bail money because they do stupid shit? Or are they going to not show up? Or are they going to go, oh, look at all the art assets I just bought on Unity because they were on sale? I'm like, that's all of the money we have. How did you do that? Because apparently we gave them the credit card. Not a good idea. So know who you're going into business with, and even if you think you know them, do background checks anyway.
As an extension of that, when you're starting a new company, when you're starting a small company, any one bad hire could potentially ruin you, right? Think about if you have a team of 5 people, one person is not doing their job, that's like 20% of your team is just not doing any output, right? And they can mess up your other operations, they can screw with your other employees, right? Thankfully, I haven't personally run into that kind of trouble, but I would attribute that to this advice that I got early on. We had to be very, very careful about everyone we looked at, just because even one bad hire would represent a very large percentage of the teams.
That would be put in clawback agreements, right? So if that person actually is not good, the company can still get the shares back and not have somebody who's dead on their books with 20% 6 years from now when you're actually trying to raise some money.
Great. Thank you so much, guys. That was a really fun panel. I've enjoyed chatting with you all. Everyone will be available, meet to match, around the conference if you have any more questions. So big thank you and round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.